The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, each chime echoing through the empty corridors of Thornfield Manor like a warning. Sarah Matthews pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as a chill crept up her spine. Was it just the autumn wind howling outside, or something else? 3 days ago, she had arrived at this remote English countryside estate as the new governess, and already she felt something wasn't right. The servants barely spoke above whispers. The master of the house remained mysteriously absent, and the portraits lining the walls seemed to follow her with their painted eyes. "You'll be comfortable here, Miss Matthews," Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper, had told her upon arrival, though the older woman's trembling hands suggested otherwise. "Just remember to keep your door locked at night, and never, under any circumstances, venture into the east wing." Sarah had nodded politely, assuming it was simply the protocol of a grand house. Now, as she made her way down the dimly lit corridor toward her bedchamber, she wasn't so sure. The candlelight flickered, casting monstrous shadows across the faded wallpaper. Had that shadow moved independently of her own? Sarah quickened her pace, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet. The year was 1887, and Sarah had left behind a comfortable teaching position in London to take this post at double the salary. The advertisement had been specific: young lady of good education and temperament, unattached, willing to reside permanently. The permanent part had struck her as odd, but the generous pay had quieted her concerns. Now, standing in this cold, dark hallway, those concerns returned with haunting clarity. A soft thud from somewhere above made her freeze. The sound came again, a dull rhythmic noise like someone slowly dragging something heavy across the floor. Sarah looked up at the ceiling, her heart pounding against her ribs. According to Mrs. Wilson, the rooms above were unoccupied. The entire east wing was sealed off and had been for decades before she could contemplate further. A door at the end of the hallway creaked open by itself, just a few inches, as if inviting her forward. The rational part of Sarah's mind told her it was merely a draft, yet her instincts screamed otherwise. She stood paralyzed, watching as the door slowly opened wider. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. Only silence answered. Against her better judgment, Sarah moved toward the open door, her candlelight creating a small circle of visibility in the darkness. The door led to a narrow staircase she had never noticed before, spiraling upward into blackness. A cold draft drifted down, extinguishing her candle with a sudden hiss. Sarah gasped, now standing in complete darkness. She should turn back. Every fiber of her being knew this. But curiosity propelled her forward. Feeling along the wall, she took one step up, then another. The staircase seemed to go on forever, the air growing colder with each step, carrying a strange, sweet smell that reminded her of decay. Finally, her hand touched a doorknob. Sarah hesitated, then turned it slowly. The door swung open to reveal a large, circular room with tall windows, allowing moonlight to spill across the dusty floor. In the center stood a covered object, roughly the size and shape of a cradle. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she approached. With trembling fingers, she reached for the sheet covering the object. Just as her fingertips brushed the fabric, a hand clamped down on her shoulder. "What are you doing here?" The voice was deep, angry, and unmistakably male. Sarah whirled around to face a tall man with severe features partially hidden in shadow. His grip on her shoulder was like iron. I'm sorry, she stammered. I'm Sarah Matthews, the new governess. The door was open and You should not be here, he interrupted, his voice softening slightly. This part of the house is forbidden. I am Lord Thornfield. You would do well to remember my rules if you wish to remain employed here. His face emerged into a patch of moonlight, and Sarah had to stifle a gasp. A jagged scar ran from his right temple down to his jaw, giving his otherwise handsome face a frightening asymmetry. But it was his eyes that truly unsettled her. Dark, hollow, like someone who had witnessed horrors beyond imagination. Forgive me, my lord, Sarah managed, dropping into a curtsy. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. He released her shoulder but continued staring with those haunted eyes. Now, follow me. This house has claimed enough victims already. I'd rather not add you to the list. Victims? The word hung in the air between them as he led her back down the staircase. What exactly had she stumbled into? The following morning dawned grey and misty. Sarah sat at breakfast alone, pushing food around her plate, her mind racing with questions about the previous night's encounter. The dining room was cavernous, clearly designed for a large family, yet Lord Thornfield took his meals alone in his study. And Sarah had yet to meet any other residents besides the handful of servants. More tea, miss? Mrs. Wilson appeared at her elbow, making Sarah jump. Yes, thank you, Sarah watched as the housekeeper poured with unsteady hands. Mrs. Wilson, may I ask about the East Wing? I accidentally found myself there last night and met Lord Thornfield. The teapot clattered against the cup. You met him? And you're still here? Mrs. Wilson's eyes widened. He usually sends staff away immediately if they trespass. He was stern but understanding, Sarah replied carefully. But he mentioned something strange. He said the house had claimed enough victims. What did he mean? Mrs. Wilson's face paled. It's not my place to speak of it, miss. But if you value your safety, you'll focus on your duties and forget what you saw. Before Sarah could press further, the door opened and a small figure entered. A girl of about 10 with long dark hair and solemn eyes. She wore a simple black dress that made her pale skin appear almost translucent. You must be Miss Charlotte, Sarah said, rising to greet her new pupil. I'm Miss Matthews, your new governess. The girl stared at her without speaking, then slowly approached the table. As she drew closer, Sarah noticed something odd about her movements. They were too fluid, almost gliding, as if her feet barely touched the ground. Charlotte doesn't speak much, Mrs. Wilson explained, placing a plate before the child. Not since the incident. Incident? Sarah asked. Mrs. Wilson shot her a warning glance. Her mother's passing. 5 years ago now. Charlotte looked up sharply at the mention of her mother, her dark eyes flashing with what might have been anger. She reached for her glass of milk, but as her fingers touched it, the glass shattered, sending milk in glass shards across the table. Sarah gasped, jumping back to avoid the spray. Are you hurt? Charlotte showed no reaction to the broken glass, not even surprise. She simply stared at the spreading puddle of milk with disturbing intensity. I'll clean this, Mrs. Wilson said hurriedly, already mopping up the mess. Charlotte, perhaps you should show Miss Matthews to the schoolroom. The girl rose silently and walked to the door, pausing to look back at Sarah with an expectant gaze. Still shaken, Sarah followed her young charge through the winding corridors. The schoolroom was located in the west wing, a large, bright room with tall windows overlooking the overgrown gardens. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a globe stood in one corner, covered in a fine layer of dust. It appeared unused for years. "Have you had a governess before me?" Sarah asked as Charlotte took a seat at the small desk. The girl nodded once, then held up 5 fingers. "5 governesses?" Sarah was stunned. What happened to them? Charlotte's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She drew a finger slowly across her throat in a slicing motion. A cold knot formed in Sarah's stomach. "That's not funny, Charlotte. What really happened to them?" Instead of answering, Charlotte opened her desk and removed a sheet of paper and a pencil. She began to draw with quick, deliberate strokes. Sarah watched as a figure took shape. A woman hanging from the rafters, her face contorted in agony. "Charlotte?" Sarah snatched the paper away. "This is highly inappropriate. We'll start with proper lessons now." The morning progressed with reading and mathematics, which Charlotte performed with eerie perfection, never speaking a word. By noon, Sarah felt drained, as if the girl had somehow sapped her energy. When the lunch bell rang, Charlotte left without a backward glance, leaving Sarah alone in the suddenly too quiet room. Seeking fresh air, Sarah decided to explore the gardens. Outside, the estate revealed its former grandeur. Stone pathways winding through what once must have been magnificent formal gardens, now partially reclaimed by wilderness. At the far end stood a small mausoleum, its white marble gleaming even under the overcast sky. Drawn to it, Sarah made her way through the overgrown path. The entrance to the mausoleum was unlocked, the heavy door swinging open at her touch. Inside, she found a single stone sarcophagus bearing the name Eleanor Thornfield, beloved wife and mother, 1845 to 1882, Charlotte's mother. The inscription continued with a warning that made Sarah's blood run cold. Let her rest in the peace she was denied in life. A sound behind her made Sarah turn. Lord Thornfield stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the light. "Twice now I found you where you shouldn't be," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Are you deliberately disobeying my instructions?" "The door was unlocked," Sarah replied, finding courage despite her fear. "I meant no disrespect. I'm trying to understand this household so I can properly care for Charlotte." His expression softened slightly. "My daughter needs stability. 5 governesses have failed to provide that." "What happened to them?" Sarah asked, remembering Charlotte's disturbing drawing. Lord Thornfield's gaze dropped to the sarcophagus. "They couldn't handle Charlotte's unique temperament. They claimed to see and hear things. Claimed my daughter was somehow responsible." "Responsible for what?" "Accidents, frightening coincidences." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers with sudden intensity. "Are you a superstitious woman, Miss Matthews?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I believe in what I can see and touch, my lord. But I also believe there are many things in this world we don't fully understand." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. A diplomatic answer. "Come, let us leave the dead in peace." As they walked back toward the house, Lord Thornfield kept a respectful distance but remained close enough for conversation. "My wife was beautiful, intelligent, and deeply troubled. After Charlotte's birth, she changed, claimed to hear voices, see things that weren't there. The doctors called it hysteria. I called it a tragedy. How did she die? Sarah asked softly. He stopped walking, his gaze fixed on the distant manor house. They said it was suicide. She jumped from the east tower during a thunderstorm. Charlotte was in the room when it happened. She hasn't spoken a word since. The revelation sent a chill through Sarah. I'm so sorry. Don't be. You didn't know her. His tone had hardened again. Dinner is served at 7. I would appreciate your company tonight, Miss Matthews. There are matters regarding Charlotte's education I wish to discuss. Before she could respond, he strode away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and a growing sense of unease. That night, dressed in her best gown, a modest navy blue affair with a high collar, Sarah made her way to the dining room. The house felt different after dark. The corridors longer, the shadows deeper. Twice, she thought she heard footsteps behind her. But when she turned, no one was there. Lord Thornfield awaited her standing by the fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had changed into formal evening attire, the stark black and white emphasizing his tall, lean figure. The scar on his face looked less severe in the warm firelight. Miss Matthews, he acknowledged with a slight bow. Thank you for joining me. Dinner was served by the silent Mrs. Wilson. Roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables, followed by a light pudding. Throughout the meal, Lord Thornfield inquired about Charlotte's progress, seeming genuinely concerned about his daughter's education and well-being. She's extremely intelligent, Sarah observed, but troubled, that drawing today. Lord Thornfield's knife scraped against his plate. She draws disturbing images. The doctors say it's her way of processing trauma. Best not to give it too much attention. And the broken glass at breakfast? She didn't seem surprised when it happened. Charlotte has... He hesitated, searching for words. Episodes? Unexplainable things tend to happen around her when she's upset. The doctors attribute it to some form of telekinesis, though I find such explanations difficult to accept. Sarah remembered Charlotte's eerie smile and felt a shiver run through her. Is that why the other governesses left? They left because they were weak-minded women who preferred superstition to science, he replied sharply. My daughter needs someone stronger. I believe you might be that person, Miss Matthews. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but as the evening wore on, Sarah became increasingly aware of a subtle tension in the air. More than once, she caught Lord Thornfield watching her with an unreadable expression. As they finished their wine in the drawing room after dinner, Sarah finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. My lord, what was in that covered cradle in the east tower? The wine glass in his hand still halfway to his lips. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Sarah feared she had overstepped. Then, with deliberate calm, he placed his glass on the side table. My wife gave birth twice, Miss Matthews. Charlotte was the first. 2 years later came Thomas. He lived 3 days. Sarah's heart sank. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Few do. Eleanor never recovered from the loss. She became convinced the baby spirit remained in the house. She would sit for hours in the nursery, singing lullabies to an empty cradle. His voice had grown hoarse. The doctors recommended we seal that room, remove the reminder of our loss. I followed their advice, but Eleanor found ways back in. The night she died, she claimed Thomas was calling to her from the tower window. A heavy silence fell between them. Outside, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the windows like ghostly fingers seeking entrance. "You should retire now, Miss Matthews," Lord Thornfield said finally. "The hour grows late, and Charlotte rises early." Sarah nodded, rising from her chair. "Thank you for sharing your story, my lord. Knowledge helps understanding." He stood as well, suddenly very close. "Does it? Or does it merely feed our darkest fears?" His hand reached out, almost touching her face, before falling back to his side. "Good night, Miss Matthews. Lock your door." Sleep eluded Sarah that night. The wind had picked up, driving rain against her window in sheets. Lightning occasionally illuminated her room in harsh, white flashes, followed by rumbling thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Around 2 in the morning, a different sound cut through the storm. A child's laughter, high and clear. Sarah sat up in bed, listening intently. There it was again, followed by the patter of running feet past her door. "Charlotte?" Sarah called, slipping out of bed and wrapping her robe around her nightgown. She opened her door cautiously, peering into the dark hallway. A small figure stood at the far end, barely visible in the gloom. Lightning flashed, confirming it was Charlotte, still in her daytime dress, staring back at Sarah with an unsettling smile. "You should be in bed," Sarah said firmly, stepping into the corridor. "It's the middle of the night." Charlotte's smile widened. She raised one finger to her lips in a shushing gesture, then turned and ran around the corner toward the forbidden east wing. "Charlotte, stop!" Sarah hurried after her, propriety forgotten in her concern for the child. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly before her. The distance to the corner somehow longer than it should have been. When she finally rounded it, Charlotte was gone, but a door stood ajar at the end of the hall. The same door that had led to the spiral staircase. Sarah hesitated, remembering Lord Thornfield's warnings. But what if Charlotte had gone up there? What if she was in danger? Making her decision, Sarah approached the door and began climbing the stairs once more. This time she had no candle, but frequent lightning provided brief glimpses of her surroundings. The staircase felt different tonight, narrower, steeper, the air thick with a sweet, cloying scent that made her head swim. From above came the sound of humming, a lullaby, soft and haunting. When Sarah reached the top, the circular room was bathed in an unnatural blue glow. The covered cradle stood as before, but now the sheet rippled gently, as if something beneath it was moving. The humming grew louder, and Sarah realized with a jolt that it wasn't coming from Charlotte. A woman sat beside the cradle, her back to Sarah. She wore a white nightgown, her long dark hair hanging loose down her back. One pale hand rocked the cradle gently. "Hello?" Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "Mrs. Thornfield?" The humming stopped. Slowly, the figure turned. Sarah stumbled backward with a cry of horror. The woman's face was that of Eleanor Thornfield. She recognized her from the portrait in the main hall, but distorted, the skin bluish and bloated, the eyes sunken yet gleaming with an unholy light. Water dripped from her hair and clothes, pooling on the floor beneath her. "You're not real," Sarah gasped, pressing herself against the wall. "You can't be real." The apparition's mouth curved into a grotesque smile. When she spoke, her voice was like stones grating against each other. "Have you come for my children too?" "Your children?" Sarah repeated, her mind reeling. "Charlotte is safe. She's..." "Not just Charlotte." The thing that had been Eleanor interrupted, gesturing to the cradle. Thomas needs me. They tried to keep us apart, but a mother always finds her children. Lightning struck close by, momentarily flooding the room with blinding light. In that instant, Sarah saw the cradle's covering had fallen away, revealing not an infant, but a small skeleton, yellowed with age, tiny fingers curled around what looked like a lock of hair. Sarah screamed, the sound tearing from her throat as thunder crashed overhead. She turned to flee but found Charlotte blocking the doorway, the same eerie smile on her face that her mother's corpse wore. "Charlotte, we need to go," Sarah pleaded, fighting rising panic. "This isn't safe." "Mother wants you to stay." Charlotte spoke for the first time, her voice unnaturally deep for a child. All the others stayed. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. The missing governesses hadn't left at all. "What have you done?" Sarah whispered. "I haven't done anything," came a male voice from behind Charlotte. Lord Thornfield stepped into view, his face half hidden in shadow. "My daughter, however, has her mother's gifts." "Gifts?" Sarah echoed in disbelief. "You call this a gift?" "The power to touch the veil between worlds," he explained calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Eleanor could do it too, before the doctors convinced me she was mad. I didn't believe her when she said Thomas's spirit remained. I sealed him away, denied him his mother's comfort." His voice cracked with emotion. "That night on the tower, she wasn't jumping to her death. She was reaching for our son, who she saw floating beyond the window. I tried to stop her, and in the struggle—" "You killed her," Sarah finished, horror dawning. "It wasn't suicide." "It was an accident," he roared, his composure cracking. "I loved her, but the damage was done. When I realized Charlotte could see her mother's spirit, could communicate with both Eleanor and Thomas, I knew I had been wrong. I've spent 5 years trying to make amends." Behind Sarah, the spectral Eleanor had risen, water still streaming from her sodden clothes. Sarah was trapped between the ghost, the child, and the madman. "The other governesses," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They discovered the truth." Lord Thornfield's expression hardened. "They threatened to take Charlotte away, claimed she was possessed. I couldn't allow that. My family needs to be together, Miss Matthews. Eleanor needs a living vessel to fully return to this world. The others weren't suitable, but you—" His eyes gleamed with fanatical light. "Eleanor has chosen you." The ghost's cold, wet hands suddenly gripped Sarah's shoulders from behind, the touch burning like ice against her skin. Sarah screamed again, struggling against the impossible strength of the dead woman's grasp. "Please," she begged, looking at Charlotte. "This isn't right. Your mother's gone, Charlotte. This thing isn't her anymore." For a moment, doubt flickered across the child's face. "Mother loves me," she said, but her voice had lost its unnatural depth, sounding like the confused 10-year-old she truly was. "I'm sure she did," Sarah agreed desperately. "The real Eleanor loved you very much. But people who love us don't hurt others. They don't frighten us or make us do terrible things." The ghost's grip tightened painfully, and Sarah felt a creeping coldness spreading from the points of contact, as if Eleanor's death was seeping into her body. Her vision began to darken at the edges. "Charlotte," she gasped, "you don't have to do this. You can let go." Lord Thornfield surged forward. "Don't listen to her. This is our chance to be a family again." But Charlotte's expression had changed, tears welling in her eyes. "Father, I'm scared. Mother doesn't look right anymore. She doesn't smile like she used to. She'll be herself again once she has Miss Matthews' body," he insisted, reaching for his daughter. "Come here, Charlotte." Instead, Charlotte backed away, shaking her head. "Number this is wrong." She looked at the skeletal infant in the cradle, then at the monstrous thing that had been her mother. "They should rest, Father. Thomas and Mother should rest." "Ungrateful child." Lord Thornfield lunged for Charlotte, but in his rage he misjudged his footing on the rain-slicked floor. His momentum carried him toward the tall windows. Sarah watched in horror as he crashed through the glass and disappeared into the stormy night, his scream quickly swallowed by the wind and rain. The moment he vanished, the ghost's grip on Sarah loosened. The apparition drifted toward the broken window, looking out into the darkness where her husband had fallen. Then slowly, she turned back to Charlotte, reaching out one dripping hand toward her daughter. Charlotte stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Mother. I love you, but you need to go now. You and Thomas both." For a heartbeat, Eleanor's grotesque features seemed to soften, the malevolence fading from her sunken eyes. She looked almost human again, almost like the beautiful woman in the portrait downstairs. She nodded once, then drifted to the cradle and gathered the tiny skeleton in her arms. With one last look at her daughter, Eleanor Thornfield stepped through the broken window, cradling her infant son, and vanished into the storm. Charlotte collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Sarah, freed from the ghost's grasp, rushed to wrap her arms around the child. Together, they huddled on the floor of the tower room as the storm gradually subsided, the first grey light of dawn breaking through the clouds. When morning fully arrived, they descended the tower stairs to find Mrs. Wilson and several other servants gathered at the bottom, faces pale with shock. "Lord Thornfield," Mrs. Wilson stammered. "We found him in the garden. He's dead." Sarah held Charlotte closer. "There was an accident in the tower. His lordship fell." The housekeeper's eyes widened as she looked from Sarah to Charlotte. "The curse," she whispered. "It's broken, isn't it?" Sarah felt Charlotte nod against her side. "Yes," the girl said, her voice small but clear. "They're gone now. All of them." Later, as authorities were summoned and statements taken, Sarah sat with Charlotte in the library, away from the commotion. The official verdict would likely be accidental death during the storm, the truth of Thornfield Manor's haunting buried along with its master. "What will happen to me now?" Charlotte asked, her voice stronger with each passing hour, as if finding it again after years of silence. Sarah squeezed her hand. "I'll stay with you if you'd like. As your guardian, not just your governess. We'll close the east wing properly this time and make the rest of the house a real home." Charlotte considered this, then nodded slowly. "I'd like that, but Miss Matthews?" "Yes? The East Wing isn't the only place with secrets. This house has many hidden things. Some should stay hidden." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm sunlight streaming through the library windows. She looked at Charlotte. Just an ordinary 10-year-old girl now, but one who had lived with ghosts and witnessed horrors no child should see. "Then we'll let them stay hidden," Sarah promised. "Some doors are better left closed." Charlotte smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, and some should never have been opened at all." As life at Thornfield Manor settled into a new routine in the days that followed, Sarah sometimes thought she heard faint sounds in the night. Footsteps, whispers, once even the distant cry of an infant. But whether these were lingering echoes of the manor's dark history or simply the natural creaks and groans of an old house, she chose not to investigate. Some questions, after all, were better left unanswered. And some ghosts, even when laid to rest, leave shadows that never truly fade. If you enjoyed the haunting tale of Whispers of Thornfield Manor, don't let the story end here. Hit that like button if mysterious governess Sarah's journey gave you chills. Subscribe now for more spine-tingling Gothic horror stories delivered straight to your feed. And don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss our next terrifying tale. Share your theories about Thornfield's secrets in the comments below.